Thinking about it, and we are live. Hey guys, welcome. It's about time I get here. Hey, we had a great week here. I hope you're having a great week too. I hope the kids are behaving themselves. Some of you have the fortune of having your children back in school. Others are still Zooming. Some of you are struggling with speech therapy wearing face masks, and some of you things are going just great. There's still a big fatigue going on with the parents with this whole COVID 19, and obviously some kids with anxiety and agitation being at home. So I thought today, again, people are asking to go over the role of cannabis, the role of cannabis in managing our kids, both the legal that's legal in all states plus the ones that are legal in just a few states. What's the difference? Well, the legal in all states has no THC. The legal in a few states like California, Washington, Oregon, Florida, uh, that would be those products that do have THC that need a physician's referral, or but they don't call it a prescription, recommendation or something like that. So what we're doing here is we're working with the endocannabinoid system. We have a whole system of um, receptor sites in our body that, when get tickled with endocannabinoids, cannabis, uh, do something. We have receptor sites on our cells for thyroid, and when thyroid goes into its receptor site, it does something. Insulin goes into an insulin receptor site, it does something. Testosterone, it's all hormonal, right? We've talked about adrenaline for sure in the past, and it goes into its receptor site. We know what that looks like. So we have an endocannabinoid system, and this system's been utilized, if you will, for 27, well, since 2700 BC. In fact, there's a classical medical book from a Chinese emperor, Shen Yong, and talks about using cannabis. In the 1600s, it was cultivated in Jamestown, and you could actually pay taxes with cannabis. And of course, you made hemp rope, and most of our Civil War soldiers were dressed in uniforms, if they had uniforms, made from hemp, from cannabis products. In the mid 1800s, we had something called the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, which listed the medications, and cannabis was utilized for treating neuralgia, okay, and extensive menstrual bleeding. And in the 1800s, British doctors used it as an appetite stimulant, the munchies, and a muscle relaxant, and anticonvulsant. They actually knew about its positive impact on diminishing seizures, an analgesic, blocking pain, and a hypnotic, which means for sleep. This was all done in the 1800s. Okay, we're not all that much smarter than we were back then, are we? So anyway, this is what we're going to be talking about. A product that's been around for a very long time, and has been utilized in numerous ways by numerous doctors in different parts of the world. In the 1930s, because of conflicts going on between, say, Standard Oil and hemp diesel, between hemp clothing and oil-derived synthetics in the cotton industry, and of course the medicinal indications of medical cannabis versus the up-and-coming, enlarging, ever getting bigger pharmaceutical companies. They actually in 1937 put $100 marijuana tax on prescriptions. So even the AMA thought that was a bad idea, taxing pharmacists and physicians for prescribing and dispensing cannabis. $100 at a time when you were making 16 to 25 cents an hour was just very prohibitive. So we were getting rid of that, and then of course in the 1970s with or in the late 60s, early 70s, with the war on drugs, making it a Schedule One drug right next to LSD, heroin, and peyote. More dangerous, the government thought, than cocaine. Okay. So anyway, in the medicals in the 1980s, we were able to discover that we actually have cannabis receptor sites, and that was actually done in a laboratory I worked in under Dr. Ellen Howlett. And we were asking, where does cannabis work? Do we have cannabis receptor sites, or are they working at another receptor site that's taking the cannabis? Turns out we actually do have cannabis receptor sites, so it's kind of interesting. If we have cannabis receptor sites, then we must produce cannabis, and we actually do. We make something called anandamide or 2-AG, and these are our cannabis. We make opiates, endorphins, and enkephalins that are responsible for runner's high. They operate in opiate receptors. If we have opiate receptors, then we must make opiates. If we have cannabis receptors, then we must make cannabis. So we have enzyme systems that not only produce them, but we also have to have them so they break them down so they don't hang in there very long. So it's kind of a very interesting topic to consider. And then the question is, well, why did God give us cannabis and cannabinoid receptor sites? What is their purpose? We know what the thyroid receptor sites are all about, and insulin receptor sites, and of course all the hormones, but why cannabis? Well, to make it simple, so we don't belabor the point here for too long, just think of it as a dimmer switch, okay? If you have anxiety, the dimmer switch, kind of like an amplifier, just let's turn it down. If you have problems with focus and concentration, you're too easily distracted, let's bring that down. If you have increased inflammation or autoimmunity, let's bring it down. You don't have to be so autoimmune, have so much inflammation going on. In other words, it helps things to go back to homeostasis, where there's a balance, which means what we're always looking for, optimal health, right? We're always looking for ways to make our bodies more healthy this way. So that's why we make cannabis. We have receptor sites, and they're called CB1 receptor sites and CB2 receptor sites, and they've been assigned certain areas. The CB1 receptor sites are found in different parts of the central nervous system, in the peripheral nervous system, the heart, the uterus, the small intestines, testes, the skin. The CB2 receptor sites are part of the immune system and the gut. And remember, the gut is 80% immune system. So, 80% of the whole immune system is found in the gut. And they're also found in the activated glial cells in the brain, too, for those of you who are following that kind of information. All right, so when we look at the cannabinoids, we have the ones that are legal everywhere, and we think of CBD, okay, which is cannabidiol, and I use a lot of CBD, and we'll talk about this a little bit more for focus and concentration. We have CBN, which is I tend to use more for helping with sleep. And of course, then we have the THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol. In fact, remember the medical cannabis plant. It keeps changing all the time. It started to be, they started saying, well, it's got 85 different cannabinoids. Then it turned into like 165 different cannabinoids. Who knows? There's a ton of them. But just one of them, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is responsible for the euphoria, for the high, for getting stoned. And if you remove that, then you can't get high, and that's when we talk about CBD oils. But even in certain parts of the country, of the world, we'll find that illegal. I'm going to be giving a talk in Indonesia, and CBD is a big no-no in Indonesia. You can go to jail for a long, long time for CBD oil. Okay, so that's just kind of where they're at right now with that. CBD has been approved by the FDA for treating certain epileptic events like Lennox-Gastaut syndrome or Dravet syndrome, and the form of CBD that the pharmacy makes is called Epidiolex. And for a child who weighs 50 pounds, treating them for a seizure disorder with Epidiolex costs about $32,000 a year. Yeah, it's big business for them. Marinol is another product that's made for the anorexia you get with chemo, or anorexia, you just don't have an appetite. Give you the munchies, and that's a THC product. So the pharmacies can make this too, and get it from a plant. Okay, but anyway, we're talking about making recommendations or certifying for patients with a need for a little bit of THC. All right, so the state of Florida, and I know I have people watching from all around the world, but the state of Florida has approved the use of CBD with THC for treating post-traumatic stress disorder, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Crohn's, AIDS, cancer, glaucoma, epilepsy, seizure disorder, chronic pain, terminal illnesses. And they give you a nice little kind of a gray area called other similarly debilitating conditions, which we can find anxiety or chronic pain or bowel disease like Crohn's, because a lot of our kids have inflammatory bowel disease. So I can usually get that written for a lot of the kids here. The routes that I tend to use for administration are almost always oral. I only have a few people who are vaping. Patches are a good one, but our kids don't like patches. They peel them off. So I tend to use tinctures. We've recently, in this state, allowed edibles. I don't know why they said you can do anything but can't use edibles. I mean, seriously. But it's just been approved. So the baked goodies, lozenges, and suckers are coming too. There's also suppositories, which we don't use, topical creams for localized pains and aches. So that's kind of what we do. But bottom line is I just use the tinctures pretty much. And I always start with CBD, okay? Unless I'm treating anxiety. If I've got anxiety, I'm going to use CBG. If I've got focus and concentration issues, I'm going to use CBD, and I'm going to add some terpenes in there to help with the ADHD. And typically, for my bigger kids, I'm going to start at 25 milligrams per day. So that's about 12.5 milligrams, 10 milligrams twice a day. I found if I start with a smaller dose, I actually get an agitated response, so I have to give them a little bit higher dose than I normally would. For my little ones, like 3 and 4-year-olds, I'll start with a smaller dose, and I usually wait 2 or 3 days before I increase that dose and see how things are going. Oh, let's see who's joined us so far. Oh my goodness, we got a few people here. There's Heidi. Hey Heidi. And we got Jackie. Thanks for joining us. And Shelly. And it says, can you please talk about alpha and beta blockers? I can, because that'll roll right into what we're talking. Hang in there. And Nicole is with us. Nietzsche's. Hi Nietzsche's. Why can CBD be constipating? That's a good question. I'll stop right here because that's a good one, because we're talking about CBD. We don't know a lot of the reasons why, I just know it does. Okay, it is going to be impacting the CBD receptor sites in the bowels, and in some people it can be constipating. But I get problems with our kids with almost anything happening. Sometimes, I mean, my next question could be, why does CBD cause diarrhea? Okay. All we're trying to do is we try a product and we might get some side effects, and sometimes the side effects is insomnia, increased appetite, or in this case constipation. If the benefits outweigh the constipation, then I'll prescribe something to help loosen the stools too. But when you talk about why does it cause, it's a great question. Who's going to do the study to find out why? What medical school is working on our kids? When you Google CBD and autism, you're not going to find out what UCLA is discovering about it, or USC, or Syracuse, New York, or nobody is studying anything with our kids. Why do we have to give them antibiotics? Why do they get SIBO? Why do they get this? And it's like, nobody's doing any work for us. Nobody's helping us out. So we're all left to go to the internet. Fortunately for me, you can say, hey, in 30 years experience, what have you seen with such and such? Because people always ask me why, and I say, I don't know why. It just does, and it either helps them or it doesn't. And that's a hard question. It bothers me too. Can an 8-year-old be treated with ADHD with cannabis? That's what Anna writes. Hi, Miss Anna. Yeah, absolutely. I can treat 3 and 4-year-olds with it because it does not come with black box warnings. Okay, all of your psych drugs come with black box warnings. Your things like Ritalin, which is a derivative of cocaine, your amphetamines like Vyvanse, Adderall, they all have really huge risks, and there's very little risk with these products. So yeah, I will use that. And you say, what are the effects on the brain? I think maybe what you're asking, what are the long-term effects on the brain? And once again, I've been doing this so long, people would ask me 25 years ago, so what are the long-term effects of being gluten-free, dairy-free? And I'd say, well, ask me in 25 years and I'll tell you. Nobody's doing the research. The research that we have on cannabis and long-term effects is usually on people who have abused it. They've used it recreationally. They've used it with other medications, recreational or alcoholism. And so we don't have a pattern of use for medicinal like we're doing here, very light. We're not trying to get high. We're not burning through, 2 ounces a day kind of stuff. And we don't know. We don't know. And like I was saying 20 years ago, I said we can't wait 20 years to find out if this is safe or not. We need to treat your child now. And if you've got a young one who is having problems with focus and concentration, then we certainly need to do something. So if we look at the somethings out there, what's available, then we try and pick the things that have the fewest potential for harmful side effects. So that's a great question. If you overuse it, there is data that it's not good for the brain, and but that is on heavy users, people who are chronically getting stoned, and they're not doing it to treat anything. So on the other hand, what's it going to be like in a 3 or 4 year old 20 years from now? I don't know. I mean, it's a good question we have to be careful with. Boy, now the questions are really coming in here. I haven't finished what I wanted to talk about. Hey, what's with that? I'll come back here in a second and get to Rona's question. And let's see, where else we got? We got Katie, we got Kelly and Shelley. Okay, so I better hurry up so I can get to all these questions. But let me go through a few more things that I wanted to share with you. Let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah. So with young children, I'm going to, we're talking about the 2, 3, 4 year olds who are hyperactive, they're screaming, they've got anxiety. I'm going to start with 2 or 3 milligrams a day. And it's easy. It says on the label 20 milligrams per ml. So 0.1 ml, divided by 10, you got 2 milligrams right there. So you have to kind of know how to take a ratio and cut it down. And we certainly can do that. So it's very easily done. For my younger children, 5, 6, 7 years old, I might start at 5 milligrams initially and increase by 5 milligrams. And my teens, I'll probably start at 10 milligrams a dose and give them 2 or 3 doses a day. And then the fancy word that we use is titrate, or dial in the dose. We have to find the right dose for our kids because of the fact that everyone's different. When I start using a THC component, I'm going to use a very small dose. So when we start using THC, especially here in Florida, now I have to take care of kids from all around the country, and where it's legal, we can actually help the family select the products to consider. And depending on what I'm trying to treat, though, I'll start with, and I'm going to use some THC, 20 CBDs to 1 THC. Okay, that's where I'm going to go, especially for anxiety. And then if that's not enough, then I can go to 10 CBDs to 1 THC, or 5. When I'm at 5 to 1, we're still not going to get high. If I'm 10 to 1, we're not going to get high. If I'm 20 CBDs to 1, I'm not going to get high. When I get down to 5 to 1, 5 CBDs to 1 THC, we're still good. But if I go down below that and say I go 1 to 1, they call it balanced hybrids, 1 CBD to 1 THC, got to be careful. I can get them stoned. And if I go from 1 to 5, 1 CBD to 5 THC or 10 or pure THC, then we have to be very careful with that. But the worst thing I could do is get them stoned. They have a great Sunday afternoon. They want flowers in their hair and they want chocolate and they're craving Led Zeppelin albums. But seriously, we don't have to do that. We can work with the medications and stay away from inadvertently. Where I hear problems is when parents try and do this on their own and they go to the dispensary. And the pimply faced kid, as they call them, the bud tenders, not bartenders, bud tenders, they get them. They just don't get good information. Because if you think about it, who is doing this on kids, really? I mean, there's very few of us doctors who would even go step out the bounds. If you go to a psychiatrist, he'll be thrilled to put your 5-year-old on Prozac. Well, I might put his kid on Prozac, but I'm not going to put my son on Prozac, okay? So there's some options here that we can do. So anyway, I like to do smaller dosing, and then I might do some microdosing throughout the day and help them out. Are there side effects, as some people were talking about? Um, there was a short-term study done in 2016 at Ben Gurion University in Israel, because they've been doing a lot of study on this. And of course, it's the same things you would think about if you ever went to a dormitory: dry eyes, red eyes, increased hunger, high moods, overly sleepy. You can't have anxiety because you can stimulate the wrong things with the wrong products there. Um, Altered senses, difficulty thinking, fuzzy thinking. I mean, like, duh, you guys know that, right? Uh, Not you guys, not my audience, but other people definitely know about those things. At high doses, you can actually get hallucinations. The nice thing that I like about cannabis is it never, ever, ever affects the respiratory center. You can't overdose it and shut down the respiratory drive like you can with narcotics. Narcotics kill you because they just shut off your breathing mechanism. Click, off, no more breath, and you die. So we don't have to worry about that. All right. It's kind of interesting about the legal issues, and I just read the other day that Congress is set to vote on our Congress is set to vote on the legalization of marijuana in September. In other words, taking it off that Schedule One list, which will be really great because once you do that, then the universities can start doing research if they're so inclined. I think they will be because there's a ton of money in the industry. Boy, did I get in the wrong field. I should have owned a dispensary. Doctors can't own dispensaries. Okay, so but boy, that'd be great. Um, anyway, so let's go ahead and well, let me tell you. I did a study, a case study on a child, 28-year-old with autism, and he came to my clinic with anxiety eloping. He would try to jump out of the car on the freeway. Okay, I mean he'll go anywhere. He was a constant picker. History of pandas. Many of you know what I'm talking about there, right? Wears pull-ups, and he'll pull down his pants and pee right on the floor. I mean, he wouldn't even use the toilet. Um, he had a lot of obsessive compulsive behaviors. He had picking of his nails and picking of his lips and rubbing his face and his nose. And you've seen the kids do that. And they can do it really hard where they get the bruises. And he was changing his clothes and underwear all the time. Well, it's interesting that those obsessive compulsive components improved dramatically when I put him on an antibiotic and antifungal. So we knew he had a pandas or PANS-like behavior there. So what I'm trying to illustrate there is that the medical cannabis is not for everything. Okay, it's not going to stop you from being constipated or chronic diarrhea. You wouldn't you wouldn't smoke some pot because you had a vaginal yeast infection. Okay, we have to take care of those things too. Gluten-free diet, dairy-free diet, low sugar diet. You guys know that. Okay, you've been vitaminized, mineralized, oilized, but dang nabbit, you still have these behaviors, whether they be anxiety or whatever. So of course, this particular case, because they're working with me for many years, gluten-free, dairy-free, grass-fed beef, we're on a bunch of supplements. So we've got the antibiotic, the antifungal, and I started him on a product because we can in Florida, a 19 to 1 CBD to THC ratio, and we were at 1 ml 3 times a day. So that's 20 milligrams total 3 times a day, and that stopped his eloping. And he was almost calm. He was still anxious and agitated, but he was so much better. And then what we did is we changed him over to a product a product called Calm, and that was a 12.5 to 1. And so 12.5 CBDs to 1 THC, so almost double what we had, the THC. Again, 20 milligrams, so he's getting 2 milligrams of THC now with about 24 milligrams of CBD. And we're doing that every 4 to 6 hours. And he was actually much calmer then and doing great. Better appetite. He's singing, not eloping. He's sleeping, no longer pees on the carpet. Decreased picking. He still picks, but a whole lot less. And now he's trying new foods. Okay. Problem is, that works great. You look like a rock star for about a month or 2 months, and then you lose it. And we started losing it, so I've had to change yet to another product. Okay, so I'm going now to a 1-to-1. Eventually, we're going to arrest these behaviors, and he's not going to keep trying to undo what we're doing. All right, so that's kind of a whirlwind tour of cannabinoids. So I'm using it for focus, concentration. I'm using it for anxiety relief. We can use it for sleep too if I need to. So let's go to your questions here, and we have quite a bit to go through. So let's get down to it here. Some of these I already answered. Um, So, hi Pam. Pam asks, what type of CBD for focus and concentration for a terrific 19-year-old? Okay, great. Miriam'sHopeHemp.com. Miriam'sHopeHemp.com. And I would use, if this was a 19-year-old in my office, I would use their CBD with the terpenes for ADHD. Terpenes for ADHD. It's called Daily 50. They also have a Daily 25 and Daily 100. I'd start with Daily 50. And if this was a kid in my clinic, I would probably put him on 0.5 mLs twice a day to start and titrate upward. Okay, so that's what I would do for that. Let's see, I already answered Rona. Kelly. Let's see, Kelly says, how can you tell that a formula is made with quality ingredients and safe processing procedures? Kelly, that's really a tough one. And the only way that I can ultimately tell, because they can put anything on the label, third party tested, which I like, I think that's reasonable. I'm in a position where I can try different products on the kids. The kids on the autism spectrum do not give you a placebo effect if what you're doing is working or it's not. Okay, so I've had the opportunity of trial and failure with other people's kids. So I've come to a group of providers of these products that I trust that are doing very good, and the kids still keep giving me thumbs up, and the parents are doing the Snoopy happy dance. The kid's sleeping, the kid's got more focus, the speech therapist wants to know what we did, ABA saying he's meeting all of his goals, then I know what I'm using. I'm getting feedback real quickly is working. It's not a bunch of phooey stuff. So trial and error, I guess, if you're going to do this on your own, or you email us and say, hey, which brands do you like the best? And I already told you, I'm really, can I say this? I'm really high on Miriam's Hope Hemp. Remember, there's no THC in there. I can't get high, but I really like that company, and they're very good to our people. Can CBD or THC help with aggression? That's what Katie asks. That's a great one. Aggression comes from a lot of places, so I would want to first make sure that we're not the alpha lion that we've talked about before on anxiety and aggression. That aggression can come from constipation. Okay, you can be very aggressive if you're constipated, so I would want to make sure that we're not constipated. Aggression can come from too much adrenaline, and in this particular case, something called noradrenaline, and that's where I'd put these kids on an alpha blocker first. Aggression can come from the wrong bacteria in the bowels, and I'll use Flagyl for that, okay, because of the fact that if you've got abnormal bacteria, you'll be a pincher, biter, a kicker, a stool smearer, okay, or somebody who likes to play with their poop like it's a Play-Doh factory. That could be from bacteria or parasites. So you can imagine, that's why I can't say anything is like the cure for these kids. Like, oh, if you just put everybody on pot, they're going to be fine. That's not true. It's just a tool in the tool chest that we have, and we have to make sure that the other tools are working just fine. So I would work really hard. It breaks my heart to have any kid who's aggressive toward themselves, where they're doing the self-injurious behaviors, the pinching, the biting, the big calluses on the hand for all the gnawing on there, or where they're coming after mom or dad or one of the people who are working with them, biting them, kicking them, headbutting, or property destruction. They're breaking walls, glass, computers, laptops, and of course the iPhone that gets hurled across the room and shatters. So yeah, we have to go after aggression, but there's quite a few places that aggression can come from that cannabis won't help. Now, where it does help, though, that's a good point. Where it does help is aggression that follows anxiety. So in other words, the anxiety builds so much, they get aggressive. Anxiety can build in people and drive them to suicide. Okay, they'd rather die than feel this anxiety. That's the ultimate form of self-aggressive behavior, is when you hang yourself. Okay, so we just have to be very careful with aggression, as trying to find its root cause defect, where it's coming from. So not a simple question there. All right, so let's see. Shelley writes that I've been treating my son with CBD for 9 years. He's 23. you were definitely on the cutting edge of using CBD 9 years ago. Okay, so that's good. I was starting about that time in California because we could. Very cool. Ron asks, is it safe with other medications such as SSRIs and stimulants? You can Google that, and you can put in your medication and cannabis and see if they go together. Okay, there are some things that do not play nicely with cannabis. You certainly can't be pregnant with cannabis. So I would definitely just go ahead and I like going to drugs.com, and in the middle of it there's a drug interactions. You can do that there, or you can just Google it and read a few of the papers on your particular products that you have. Okay, and Sophia. Hi, Sophia. Hi, can yeast make ADD worse? Yeast can make anything worse. Okay, so that's a very good question. It can make anxiety worse. It can make sleep issues worse. It can make you maniacal. In other words, laughing in the middle of the night, hanging upside down. It can disconnect you with focus and concentration. Yeast is a real bad actor. Okay, we've been giving my son Candida albicans. We are giving my son Candida albicans, and he is the worst ever. I've never heard of anybody giving their child a yeast infection. I don't know if that's quite what you mean. I've never heard that before. Let's give my kid strep throat. Let's give my kid Candida albicans. I haven't heard that, so I don't know if I'm understanding what you're trying to do there or where you've heard. But Grandma says if what you're doing is hurting, stop doing it. So I'd say in this particular case, whatever you're doing, from what you're writing here, let's go ahead and stop it. And Shelley writes down it works 100%. So we go up there and she's treating her son with CBD. So the good point that Shelley's illustrating is that we don't need THC all the time. Okay, THC is nice to have if you have it available and you need it. But I start with the CBD products first because it's even harder to get in trouble with just CBD. All right, let me refresh my screen here and see if there's any more questions. And if not, what a great half hour we have had together. This has just been amazing. And if you did write a question that I didn't get to, please submit it to mendingnaturally@gmail.com. mendingnaturally@gmail.com. And while you're at Mending Naturally, if you'd be so kind to sign up on our email list, because I'm worried that for whatever reason some bot might come by and find out what I'm talking about is not in alignment with the groupthink at Google or Apple or whatever, and they will remove all my videos and they will remove everything. And I want to still have a way to be able to communicate with you through a private channel or whatever. It just seems to be a big problem. In other words, we're talking about censorship here. And if I said something wrong about COVID, if I said something wrong about such and such, I could lose the whole thing, and then I'll lose my ability to communicate with you. So please put yourselves down on our list. We will not sell it. We don't do any of that stuff. I just want to know if all of a sudden I disappear, how I can communicate with you guys and get back to disseminate this kind of information. And that's at mendingnaturally@gmail.com. All right, so let me see here if I've got any more questions. Yes, I do. Melissa writes, hello, I'm a mom group on Facebook and subject of ABA services came up. A lot of moms were suggesting not to do ABA and that more times than is counterproductive and damaging. My son hasn't started ABA, but we're wondering about it. What are your thoughts? And thank you. ABA therapy is really in the hands of the individual who is working with your child. And some of our ABA therapists that work with my son Josh were absolutely amazing. In fact, they came from a lot of varied backgrounds, so they didn't come in with one way and this is how you do it. They knew 3 different approaches to ABA, and they looked at Josh and looked at his behaviors, and they were able to figure out which combination of ABA behavior modification techniques would work best with him. I think a lot of people get in trouble with ABA when the ABA therapist comes in with a very heavy hand and you are not doing anything to help your child. Gluten-free, dairy-free, get rid of yeast, get rid of bacteria, get rid of constipation, diarrhea, allergies, all the things that we're doing. So they keep hammering your child who is not ready. In other words, I think of it this way. Look, our kids are like computer systems, and this right up here is the hard drive, and all of our therapists are our software engineers. speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, ABA. They're all trying to load in software. They're all trying to show the child how to manage a certain set of stimuli in a more acceptable manner. Okay? But if the hard drive isn't working, good night. You're not going to get anywhere. I mean, you take those therapists and say, apply them to my German Shepherd for a year and 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Where do you think my German Shepherd would be in a year? The most awesome trained dog ever. Okay, where are our kids in a year? A little bit, a little bit. I've seen ABA overdone, and yeah, I agree. I think that's where you're hearing where we're doing 30 to 40 hours per week, and we're making very little progress, and we're hammering the kid, or we're just training the kid. Say hi, mom. Hi, mom. It means nothing to them. They just know when they're told to do something, they are to reply, and then they get a little treat, and then they reply and they get a little treat. So I've seen both ends. I think overall, your mommy intuition will know if the therapeutic interventions that you're doing are healthy and working well for your child. If they're not, fire their butts, okay? And I say the same thing to my families, or if I'm not helping you, not helping that child improve, fire me, okay? The proof is in the pudding. These kids don't give you a placebo effect. If what they're doing is working and you are pleased, then they're doing something well. If what they're doing is just a scream fest, which we had one therapist who came to our house and it was a scream fest, I had to fire her. Then just be very careful and trust your mommy intuition. Don't ever let anybody come down on you and say you're just a helicopter mom, or you're just hovering too close, or you're a bulldozer mom. It's like, hey, we're supposed to protect our kids. If we don't like what we see happening, it's okay. There's got to be another intervention. What supplements help with OCD behaviors? Amy writes. And the OCD behaviors, that's a very complicated one, because it could be bacterial, it could be fungal, it could be constipation, it could be I have to give them 5-hydroxytryptophan. And I did do a talk on OCD behaviors, and it's in the Mending Naturally library there. And I'd say, instead of like, I can do another half-hour talk on OCD, but I don't want to take another half hour now because it's a big, complicated topic, but you deserve an answer. So I'd say Mending Naturally has a great library. Look through it, and there'll be OCD there. Punch that, watch that video, and you can actually see my approach and treatment. And Shelley again writes about the alpha and beta blockers. I want to get my kid off of heavy antipsychotics, and they don't work anyway. Join the family there, right? Plus, I'm not sure my approach to son's doctor without the subject of insulting her. My son will be 24. He's not a child. Again, I have used and I will use the heavy-duty antipsychotics when nothing is working that I've done, and I'm trying to keep the child out of the psych ward, or the mom out of the psych ward. We get to a point where somebody's going to the psych ward, mom or the child, unless I fix this kiddo. Then I can come in and try Abilify, or I can try Risperdal. But I tend to use it just as a stabilizing agent until I can figure out what's going on. Is this constipation? Is this seizure? Do I have an MRI of the head and make sure that there's not a mass in the brain? I mean, these are real kids with real problems too. I mean, we don't want to just say everything is autism and that's just the way it goes. So, and I find that psychiatrists are the only physicians who don't examine the organ they treat. So why wouldn't they get an MRI or a SPECT scan or a PET scan or something to make sure that the brain is hunky-dory, and EEG, these aren't seizures, there's not a deformity in the brain that's causing the behaviors that we're seeing. I like the alpha and beta blockers, but remember what we're using those for is the condition where the adrenal gland is making too much adrenaline, the beta blocker, or too much noradrenaline, the alpha blocker. And you can tell if they're doing that. The easiest way is watching their heart rates, and that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier with the watch. Whether it's a Apple Watch or it's a Fitbit watch, which is a less expensive model, and we could see where their heart rates are. I did do a complete talk on anxiety and my approach to alpha and beta blockers, and you're welcome to, again, cruise the Mending Naturally library and then mendingnaturally.com, and you can take a look and push the button and sit back with your headphones on and see the talk, okay? And if you have any specific questions, Shelley, after that, just email us next week, and we'll be glad to answer it. In fact, I'll look for your email about that. All right, so we're done for today already. Isn't that amazing? What a great talk. I love talking about getting our kids better, helping your kids get better, improving their activities of daily living, quality of life for them, quality of life for you. If I am, if I improve them, I improve moms like 85% of the time. Okay, so I think
I'm not sure I understand.
that was Siri. Wasn't that great? Well, if she doesn't understand by now, she's not going to. Anyway, guys, have a fabulous week, and I will be talking with you next week. If there's a particular subject that's burning in your heart that you want me to talk about, either present new information or even if it's an old topic and you just want to go through it again, email us, mendingnaturally@gmail.com, and we'll be glad to help you out with that. All right, guys. Talk to you later, and have a great week. Bye now.